Alright, welcome back to the SuperCoach and Off channel. In this video, we're going to preview round 4 of the 2026 NRL SuperCoach season. Pretty interesting week, given that there is a lot of very popular SuperCoach options that are out, and my team is no exception to that. I guess some of the latest updates since the round preview, probably the big one, is Payne Haas out with a shoulder injury. There's no sort of set time on recovery, so probably going to hold, but I guess we'll talk more about that in a minute. I guess the other big news since is Ryan Couchman getting 4 weeks for the hip drop tackle. Not as bad as first predicted. About 6 weeks was the male, but it's only 4. And then obviously you've got Trey Mooney took the early plea for 1 week for fees on the bye. Tom Chester also got a week. And we brought in Latrell last week, and he's now on the bye. So I'm just going to use the optimize real quick just to sort of see how we're looking for this week. And interestingly, flipped Tommy Chester into the backup fullback spot. So we've got a couple of fullbacks. We've got 6 centre wings, which is handy. Pretty thin in the second row this week and the front row. But it looks like we've got 19 playing. That's counting by obviously off the bench and Fayamani. And that'd be 20, won't it? Because we've got 18 in the squad. But we will look to make some moves and try and upgrade our team. But before we do that, we'll have a look at the most popular trade-ins and trade-outs this week. And the number one most popular is Trey Mooney. I guess this might be just due to the fact that we need numbers in the front row given all the outs there. But I'm leaning towards holding Mooney. It's only 1 week. Obviously, he had a down game in terms of scoring. And but I think he does have the base that, he can be a really handy option, particularly with the dual position. There's not a lot of other options around that price point. Particularly given number 2, Jermaine Hopgood, is out for the season, so he is an obvious trade out. Toby Couchman's going to miss this week with concussion, should be back for round 5. But at the same time, the role probably hasn't quite been what we hoped it would be. Definitely not playing as many minutes as last year. In saying that, that could be in part due to his brother being available, playing decent minutes. But in saying that, I think if you've got him, here's one you can trade out. There's a good bit of cash on his head that you could definitely do a lot of good things with. Payne Haas at number 4. So again, it's probably dependent on the news on how long he is out for. I'm going to hold, I think, unless something comes out tomorrow that he is going to be out for an extended amount of time. But yeah, I'm going to plan on holding. Ryan Couchman, so he does miss 4 weeks. And I guess when you think about the timeline of him coming back in, round 8, he'll come back in. So by that time, some of our other cash cows like your Heel and Lukey's, your Noah Martins, Joe Chan perhaps, if you're not planning on keeping them, I think Couchman is one you could bring back in as a downgrade target and get the rest of his cash. In saying that, if you're well covered for this week, you've managed to avoid a lot of the other carnage, and you can sort of park him there as like your second row 6. It might be worth a hold, save 2 trades. But I think, I'm going to probably move him this week, and I can understand others that would. Cody Walker, so an interesting one given that he's on the bye this week. Awkward price. Probably hasn't set the world on fire the last couple of weeks. But in saying that, you sort of picked him for a reason. So, Jonah Pezzett, if you've got the sort of cheaper duo, I don't think Jonah Pezzett's the worst player this week. albeit against the Panthers, it's going to be a tricky one. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't panic and sell Cody Walker. It's probably if you've avoided all this other carnage, it could be a bit of a luxury move at this time of year. Reed Marnie, so sort of yeah, just averaging his price. Obviously, we were hoping for a bit of an uptick given the increase in tackles and stuff, but it just hasn't really worked out for Reed. Um, in saying that, I don't know if there's really many great options at hooker. Um, it probably again depends on your build, but I don't think you need to overinvest at hooker. There's just not a lot of value at the moment. Obviously, you do want to get to Brayley and Grant by the end of the year, but there's no rush to get there, particularly with the Sharks having a couple of buys coming up over the next sort of 8 weeks or so. Sam Walker at number 8. So I think there's plenty of good options at halfback, so absolutely feel free to jump off him. Lasardi, so he's back in week 7, so you can sort of copy and paste what I said with Couchman. I guess I'm super lucky that I didn't bring him in round 2, and then obviously had the ability to change to Joe Chan um, before the lockout last week. So yeah, he's definitely one that I'm looking to target in the future as a nice little downgrade option, bank some cash and use it elsewhere in the team. But then obviously he will generate some more. And Tom Flegler, so he's on the interchange bench. Um, Again, if you've managed to avoid all the other front row carnage, as you can see, the top 4 options all front row options. And he is the one you want to change. Well, I guess you probably could. On the trade-ins list this week, number 1 is Joe Chan. So obviously you missed out on a massive bump in cash, but the job security looks good given the Sardi injury. Not too much being sort of talked about Sean Bloor either. Um, and playing outside of Jerome Hughes, it's a pretty handy spot to be. So I was skeptical at the start of the year, but I guess I've now become a Joe Chan believer. So get on board. Jackson Ford at number 2 is an interesting one. Obviously, he's still got a bit of money to make with a -7 break even. Playing big minutes. Um, I don't know how much more you're going to get out of him. I think if you got on last week, it was great. But I think the ship has sailed. You might get another 80k out of him in total after this week. But you would imagine that Mitch Barnett will gradually increase his workload, which you'd imagine would bite into Jackson Ford's game time. Um, but I can see why people are doing it, particularly with all the carnage in the front row. For example, if you've got a Jermaine Hopgood and you wanted to go up to Jackson Ford, I could understand that move. Tom Jenkins at number 3. So he's already made 100k in cash. Um, at 700k, you're bringing him in if you believe that he's a keeper. Um, I think eventually, Penrith will start working the other side of the field as well. Particularly this week against Parramatta with Jonah Pezzett on the left edge there. Defensively for Para, I think the right edge might get a workout. And Tom Jenkins might be a little bit high and dry out on that left wing for Penrith. But he's done all right so far. But yeah, not for me this week. Arama Howe. So, there's a bit of a question mark with Paxton on the extended bench, but didn't factor in last week. Howe's looked good. He's dual position. He's cheap. Um, yeah, I could get around bringing him in. I've had him since the start of the year, fortunately. So yeah, get on board. Tanner Boyd. So interesting with the news that Luke Metcalf got named in the 6 and how that impacts Tanner Boyd's scoring, particularly as Metcalf can kick goals. He can be the dominant playmaker in the team. I think based on form, they have to let Boyd keep doing his thing, and Metcalf can just play his probably more natural game of just running and playing what he sees a bit. So I think it could really work out for the Warriors. In saying that, I'm probably not getting on Tanner Boyd just because of that question mark. plus the fact he's 700k, he's probably someone I'd be looking to keep for the season. And I think there's better targets at halfback that I'm happy to wait a few weeks to get on. At number 6, Stefano Uta. So I guess if you're just looking for a solid base score in your team, particularly with the front row carnage, um, and you don't really have the flexibility of going to the second row, I do think Stefano's a great pick. I've even looked at him in my team this week, but I guess I'm probably going to chase a little bit more upside. So, yeah, Stefano, great option if you want to bring him in. Reece Walsh at fullback, I guess, we know what his ceiling is. Um, with Adam Reynolds back, does he reach that ceiling as often as we'd like? Is the question mark. Um, and I guess on top of that, you throw in some of the internal turmoil there at the Broncos. Ben Teo quitting, the assistant coach. Payne Haas out this week. How do they replace his go forward? Um, yeah, I've actually got the Dolphins in a sneaky upset in that game, so I'm not going Reece Walsh, but I wouldn't begrudge anyone picking him. Number 8, Nathan Cleary. Don't think I need to say too much on this. He's locked in for me. Um, nice fixture this week against Para at Combank. He usually scores right there. So if you've got the cash, bring in Nathan Cleary. Jackson Purdue. So an interesting shout. 600k for a 5/8. If he is like your sort of one of your two premium keepers for the season, um, yeah, you could bring him in. But he does have a tough fixture against Melbourne this week, um, and yeah, I think I'm just going to wait for Sharp to get back up and running. His name this week, whether he plays or not's a different thing. Um, but yeah, once Sharp's fit and firing, I'm just going to lock and load him and Munster, set and forget in the 5/8 spot. And number 10, Tommy Turbo. So coming off the bye this week, um, I guess a few people suggested Manly aren't going the best, but he is still averaging close to 100. Actually, if I go by averages here, averaging 96, so sixth highest. Um, the Roosters haven't been going too flash. So, I think he is a great option for this week. In terms of captains, forgot to, no, not break even, sorry. Captains, coach's choice. I won't go by all. Go top 10%. These guys know what they're doing. So the most popular captain this week is Sua Fa'alongo against North Queensland, who obviously haven't been the strongest defence going around. I guess the only potential downside is it is Saturday night up in North Queensland, so it should be humid. Ball might be a bit slippery, um, but Sua Fa'alongo might also be a bit slippery. So definitely worth considering. Nathan Cleary, probably the safe captaincy option this week. As I said, great fixture against Para. Um, I think he'll go well this week. Herbie Farmworth. So the Broncos' right edge is probably the better defensive edge. If he was playing right centre, I'd be seriously considering him in the captaincy conversation. But we know that he is capable of just knocking out a solid 80 without really doing much in terms of on the scoreboard sort of impact. Nico Hines against the Sharks against the Raiders, sorry, in Canberra. I think that's a pretty bold call. Maybe just a few holding over from the fixture last week against the Dolphins, which didn't work out too well for them. Payne Haas not playing this week, so obviously just people who haven't made their moves yet. Harry Grant against the Cowboys had a bit of a dip last week, but 2 out of 3 he's scored pretty well, so might be a safer option. Latrell, again, people just haven't changed their captaincy yet. Reece Walsh, I guess if you've got Reece Walsh in your team, you can always back him in for the upside. Tanner Boyd, I guess if you're going to pay 700k for Tanner Boyd, hopefully he continues his run. And Val Holmes at number 10 against the Titans. Um, I actually do like this as a pod capsy shout. Obviously, the Titans are struggling to start the season. It could be a bit of a fill up on the Dragons side of things. VC options. So outside of the ones we've already talked about, Tommy Turbo is the big one tomorrow night. Recording this on Wednesday night, by the way. Um, yep, definitely interested in that. Hines, Jackson Ford. So pretty rare to see a workman-like front rower like Jackson Ford in the vice captain conversation. But if he gets a 97, it definitely makes you think. And James Tedesco playing on Thursday night. So again, if you've got someone like a Teddy, it kind of makes sense to put the VC on him, and we know that he can score pretty well. So in terms of my team this week, so already did the little optimise, um, and we have got a playable team. So if we were going well, we could probably try and hold some trades. I think might be a pod move this week, but we need to be aggressive. Um, we could have gone like a Couchman out, um, yeah, something like that. And we probably still will. But shout out to, I think it's Shots sent through a message, and he sort of suggested maybe, we've gone the big in the centre wing. Hasn't really worked out for us. You can see, like, we're getting pretty close to averages with our 200k guys. And, you know, Eero, Brian Toto, potentially underperforming. Kale Eero, if we have a look at his upcoming schedule, so sort of, had an interesting start with the Titans and Dolphins in the first three. Didn't quite work out for him. Um, but you can see he's got Raiders, Warriors coming up, but then has a bye in round 7 and then also has a bye in round 12. So even though there's a couple of nice fixtures dotted in there, um, I think we could probably fade him and look to bring him back in once Ronaldo Mulatalo is back and the Sharks maybe start using that left edge a little bit more. And at his price point, it's pretty easy to get to Tom Trbojevic. So let's go by average, second highest average. So we can definitely take advantage of the ceiling there. Three fullbacks, I think it's always the way we want to go towards the end of the season. So why not get in early? So that's the first move. And I could just do that. Obviously, you can do it all in one trade. But then I do want to get a bit of extra cash generation going now. So Brian Toe, I think again, he's an okay pick, but last week only scored um, 53 in that massive win against the Roosters. Against Para, as I said, they'll be targeting that right edge where he'll be playing. I'm just worried the ball won't get as far as him. I think Papali on the edge, Alamotti in the centres, they might be able to do most of the damage. And then a couple of tough fixtures against the Storm and the Dogs before the fixture opens up a little bit there. So, um, so I'm happy to downgrade Toto to Macassini. Um, and then don't feel the best about this because I've already used a couple of boosts. But this sort of round where you've got a few of your main starting options out, through injury, suspensions, those sort of things, it's probably the time to use the boost. Um, and so we've got 300, almost 60k essentially to spend. Um, so then the question is, who do we upgrade? Um, we could upgrade a Reed Marnie, but I don't really want to overinvest at hooker this early in the season. Um, we could look at doing a Trey Mooney up to Terrell May and really, lock down our front row options. But just want to wait and see on Payne Haas. We might have to do a Haas to May sort of move next week if the news is that he's out a bit longer than we hoped. Um, just looking, I'll just scroll down here, but basically we've got all the cash makers and guns. So it really comes down to Couchman or buy. So if we go with buy, we've got 617k in the bank, which could get us a Fini Fuiaki. Um, could get us not quite an Isaiah Yo, so that's fine. Could go with Papali'i against this favourable matchup this week, albeit as we said the fixtures get a bit harder after this week. Um, you know, after that we can't afford a Dylan Lucas, Samuel Finu. So if he was on the right edge, I'd be more interested. But with Luai out on the left edge, I don't know if he gets quite the quality service that he was getting. Um, talk about the Tigers' edges. Kai Pearce Paul's an interesting one at that price too. Could be a bit of a super pod. What's their fixture like? So I've got the Warriors, then the Eels, the Knights, the Broncos. It's at Campbelltown, both those games. Um, yeah, so Kai Pearce Paul is an option. Um, the other option is if we get rid of Couchman, as we said, we could probably bring him back in later, but that does open up the possibilities a bit more. I might have to go by averages here. So Jacob Preston is the guy that I'm seriously considering. Obviously, um, two good games to start the season. Obviously, scoring a try in both. I'm pretty sure it was, yeah. So scored a try in both. Um, yeah, and the Bulldogs have a okay run coming up. The Knights, so Souths with that left edge, so up against Fafita will be interesting. Penrith's obviously tough, but then Para, running at Jonah Pezzett could be an absolute fill up. The Broncos, Cowboys, Dolphins, so three Queensland teams, none of them have been setting the world on fire, other than the Broncos last week maybe. Um, yeah, and then sort of covers the first buy as well if we're starting to think that far ahead. So the question is, do we want to save a couple of future trades on Couchman up to Preston, or do we go Cooper buy to Fini Fuiaki? So what's the Dolphins run like coming up? So they've got the Broncos this week, the Seagulls, and they've also got the Panthers. So the Panthers, Warriors, Melbourne Bulldogs coming up in a few weeks' time. They've got a bye coming up as well. So I think that's just made the decision there for me. Welcome to the team, Jacob Preston. Probably solves the biggest issue as well. As a massive Bulldogs fan, haven't had any of them in the team yet, so feel a little bit better about my team just from seeing that logo there. So those are the moves, trades in terms of play options this week. Tommy Turbo, lock him in VC tomorrow night. Kenny's definitely on the bench. Tommy Chester will swap with Setu 2 against the Titans. Could be a good game for him. Just remove that from Tommy Chester. I don't think we're going to play Pezzett against the Storm, albeit it is a bit of a. Oh, sorry, the Panthers. Um, yeah, I think the Panthers are going too good to let players like Pezzett score against them. Atkinson, I think, is a great play against the Titans as well, so we'll play him for sure. Preston's going to play, so it looks like Martin plays the latest in the week, so we'll slot him in. Obviously, the front row we don't have much option. So then it comes down to our last reserve of Fayamani, Pezzett, so Marnie, so Fayamani or Marnie or Pezzett. But with the Cowboys up against the Storm, I think it could be a bit of a just a defensive slog for Marnie, so he could take some base. But I don't think the Dragons have been the strongest defensively either to start the season. Pretty sure this is like the second spoon bowl in 2 weeks where the Titans, being bottom of the table, have played 16th place. So I'm going to back Faya Marnie in again, for better or worse. So we'll go the attacking upside play of the centre wing. So Tommy Turbo, vice captain. I'm just going Cleary captain. Obviously, Fa'alongo is a very interesting option, um, but I think Cleary's going to go just as well. Honestly, I think Tommy Turbo is going to go pretty good on at 4 points tomorrow night, so I don't even think we need to worry too much about it. Which then also could solve the last reserve problem if we loop, because the last reserve will be a Latrell or something like that. But yeah, I think that's all for this video. So as always, if you've got any questions, comments, thoughts, feel free to add them below this video. Give us a like if you enjoy the SuperCoach NRL content. Subscribe for all the fantasy sports content on the channel. And other than that, we'll catch you in the next one.